Hey there, folks. Anthony Taylor here. Thanks so much for joining us. And today I want to talk to you about the strategic implementation and the 5 critical capacities that you need to think about as you implement any strategic project, strategic plan, strategic program. Okay. So my name is Anthony Taylor. I'm the managing partner at SME Strategy. We've been helping organizations create and execute their strategic plans for the past 10 years. We see so many organizations, big and small, and fundamentally they try to get 2 things. One is figure out, what they're trying to implement, which is that first step of getting alignment and clarity on where you're going. And then the bigger portion of that, sort of the 90% part, is the strategic implementation. So today I want you to, hopefully you have some paper and pen, some place to take notes so that you can start assessing yourself as to the 5 critical capacities, how you are set up as a leader, as an individual, as well as how is your team set up to do it. So I'm going to ask just a series of questions for you to assess where you're at, what is needed, what might be missing, and if you're doing great, fantastic. All right, so let's get into it. So when I talk about the 5 critical capacities for strategic implementation, I want you to, again, contextualize yourself. So you're either implementing a strategic project or a strategic plan. Okay. It implies that you're moving forward towards a specific and defined goal. So like C, strategic. When I say strategic, I mean you can't do everything. So you're choosing to do something specific and that you know what that goal is. If you don't know what that goal is, that's the first step of really making sure you're clear on where you're going. Because ultimately the destination that I put capital D, because we talk about the one destination here, but the destination will determine the strategy. In Alice in Wonderland, there's a point where she gets to a fork in the road and asks the Cheshire Cat, like, which road should I take? And he says, well, where are you trying to get to? And then he says, she says, it doesn't matter. And he says, well, then any road will get you there. So if you're not clear on the destination, then it doesn't matter what strategy you take. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger to make it easier for you to read. Okay. So being clear that you have a clear destination, having that from a team perspective and moving forward. Now I want to talk to you about the 5 critical capacities. So if you think about capacities, they're like skills, they're like attributes, they're, it's capacities. Are you able to accomplish what you need to accomplish in each of these areas? So I'm going to share the areas. We're going to go through each of them briefly, and then we'll do a summary at the end. And I just want you to know that we're going to be covering each capacity area in depth in subsequent videos. So if you want to be alerted of that, be sure to subscribe or like. But for today, it's just an overview of what you need to assess for yourself for strategic implementation. So number 1 is communication. Do you have the structures, the systems, the processes to be able to communicate effectively, get the message of strategic implementation across? Number 2, culture and behaviors. How are your people acting? How are they moving? What are their expectations as they drive through the strategic implementation process? 3, responsibilities and accountabilities. Who's doing what and where does the buck stop with each individual? 4, tracking and reporting, and I put in parentheses a dashboard. So you need the tracking and reporting, but part of that is actually being able to visualize that and see that. And the 5th part is your capacity for leadership and change management. So 5 critical capacities that are important for you to be able to drive forward these strategic projects. Oh, perfect. Sorry about that, folks. I'm just pause that. Lost that for a second. Excellent. Okay. So look at all of everything that you have as a team and say, hey, are we set up to be successful with communication, culture and behaviors, responsibilities, accountabilities, tracking in a dashboard, and then leadership and change management? So let's go into each of them. Communication. What do I mean by communication? And where do you want to assess yourself? Where can you assess yourself? So ask yourself as an individual and then ask yourself as a team, do you have a system to ensure regular and sufficient communication to support your strategic implementation? So I said, is the system good enough? Do we have a system? Is the system good enough for us to be able to support our strategic implementation? That's where you start seeing things like information falling through the cracks, having to do duplicate work. People don't know who's doing what. unclear of the prioritization of it, is there a system? Is it good enough to support your strategic implementation? Number 2 is, does your team know how to maximize the use of those channels? As in, are you getting ad hoc requests for things? Are they saying that they never got that information? Are they showing up unprepared to meetings, or are they unclear of what's happening as it relates to your strategic implementation, your strategic plan as a whole, or sort of the goings on between you and external stakeholders, external partners? All of these things, you need to have it. It needs to be good enough, and you need to be able to use it to the maximum capacity. One of the things that I see with teams is we have all these software solutions, especially like Zoom for communication, or, Basecamp, or, any sort of project management tools. But if you're not using it to the best of the capacity, then you're not going to be able to get as much out of your strategic implementation as you like. So again, assess where yourself and your team is at in terms of using and maximizing those channels. And third is looking at where can you use communication as a tool to drive forward your strategic objectives. So you have what you're trying to accomplish. You have this goal. What if all you did was focus on communication? What are the opportunities that communication alone, just making sure that the message gets to whoever it is and you get their information and then everything transfer back, will actually help you accomplish your strategic objectives? If you're watching this video, I'm going to assert that you're some sort of leader, manager, CEO, aspiring leader, and leaders, from my experience, spend about 80% of their time communicating. So you can check for yourself, say, how much time in my day-to-day do I spend communicating? If it's 60, 70, 80%, then just focusing on communication alone and making sure that you have enough of it and that it's good enough is going to transform how effective you are and how successful you are in your strategic implementation. So that's the only thing you take from today, is where can you use strategic communication to drive forward your strategic implementation? So that's the first one, and in my opinion, one of the most important. Number 2 is culture and behaviors. So you would have heard that, culture eats strategy for breakfast, and it's largely true. One of the things that often gets forgotten and is going to, I believe, increase over time is the recognition and understanding that at the heart of every organization is human beings. And the optimization of productivity is going to be the next sort of frontier of management science. And so in order to do that, the driver or the lever of that is culture and behaviors. So being able to understand cultures and behaviors and use it to your advantage is, it's a win-win. It helps you as a manager, it helps you as a leader, but it also helps the people you're working with. So how do you assess yourself if you have the capacity for culture and behaviors? Does your team have clear definitions of what is expected of them on a daily basis? Like, here's what we do, here's what we don't do. And is it explicit? Not like we value integrity, because everybody can interpret integrity in a different way. So what does it mean for you? What does it mean in your organization and specific contexts? Do those behaviors align with the accomplishment of your strategic objective? As in, is the way we do things, is the behaviors and expectations we've set out as a team going to align us and going to help us accomplish that future? Because I know a lot of organizations that they've set their values, say we've got values for 10, 20 years, or we've got values from our parent company. I say, okay, but are those the best values for you and your team, or you and your department? So, I don't know the answer for you, but I say, hey, do your behaviors align with the accomplishment of your strategic objective? And are they going to support your strategic implementation? And are they unique to you as a group? The example I use there is like offense, defense, and special teams for football. Okay. They each have their own sort of mini culture, but it aligns with the team culture. Okay. And you can use whatever analogy you want to use there, but it's just to recognize that each culture of a team is different. And in order to maximize the productivity and efficiency of people, being aware and clear of what that culture is critical. And the last question that you can ask yourself in terms of assessing your capacity is, do they know what to do? And do they know what not to do? And what are the consequences associated? So it's all well and good to have values and behaviors listed on your board, and there's like the positive of it, but do you have the negative of it? What to avoid? because then it sort of becomes like a litmus test. You're either doing it or you're not doing it. And if somebody's not doing it, then what happens? Because if the negative behavior continues unchecked or unregulated, then people are just going to keep doing it. There's no consequences. Now, I'm not saying you need to like fire everybody who doesn't align with your values, but I do want you to consider that if you don't put some sort of systems of checks and balances in place for culture and behaviors, both positive and negative, so rewarding and or punishing the behavior, it's not going to change. So when we talk about culture and behaviors, it's about fostering the behavior that we want to see. Next capacity is responsibilities and accountabilities. So ask yourself, who is responsible for the specific parts of the strategic implementation? You know, if you're doing a strategic plan, who's responsible for each of these priorities? Who's responsible for tracking and measuring these goals? Is there a person, not a group, not a committee, like an individual human being? If you have it, great. And if you don't, then you're missing out on your full potential. Where does the ownership live for each component of your plan? And it's similar to that as in who is responsible, but like who actually owns it? Not as responsible, but who's like driving it? Who's part of it? Who are the people involved? Now, it might be one person responsible, but there's several people who take ownership of it. You know, having that clear really helps because then your team can make better decisions, both at the individual level and the team level. But it ties to this third part. Is your team clear on the interdependencies within each area of your team and organization? You know, if I'm in finance and you're in marketing, and marketing requires something of finance, but finance requires something of sales. So marketing's not pulling their weight. They're blaming finance, but finance is blaming marketing or sales. You realize that there's connections. You know, organizations that typically have challenges are the ones that are done in silos, whereas the ones that have the most success are the ones that are integrated, work as a system. So are the systems within your business, are the interdependencies within your organization or business, are they clear? So next is tracking and reporting, okay? And this is, you know, where some organizations do it really well and some do it poorly. Well, the question you can ask yourself and ask your team is, how will we know if our strategic implementation is successful? Well, we've accomplished our plan. Well, what does that mean? What is the outcome? You know, what you need is tracking and reporting, and ideally on some sort of dashboard, whether that's Excel, whether that's a strategic planning tool like Cascade, whether that's a whiteboard, you know, whatever it is. How will you know if your strategic implementation is successful? And having the tracking and reporting capacities to match it. How will the rest of the team know in real time what corrective action needs to be taken? Now, I want to highlight the corrective action part because if you're going on the wrong trajectory for a matter of weeks, you know, you're losing productivity, you're losing time, you're losing opportunities. So how will the team know in real time what corrective actions needed to be taken? And if you don't have an answer to that, then just reflect for yourself. What could we do? What would we want to put in place? If we had it, what would that look like? And then, are you measuring outcomes, actions, or both? You know, it's the sort of challenge that most people are tactical. They want to do stuff, but often they forget about the why behind doing it. They forget about the outcome that they're trying to actually accomplish. So in your strategic implementation, ask yourself, are we measuring outcomes? This is the outcome we're going to accomplish, or these are the actions, these are the tasks we need to accomplish. We're going to make a marketing plan. It's like, well, do you want to drive, you know, $10,000 of revenue, or do you want more followers on Twitter? Or do you want to send 100 tweets? You know, whatever the action is, you need to be clear about both outcomes and actions in order to make it successful. Well, the last thing I want you to think about, the last pillar, the last capacity for strategic implementation is leadership and change management. And this is slightly different than when we talked about the accountability, because some people can be accountable for something without being a leader. But who specifically is going to lead the charge towards this new future? It's one of the problems I have by like leadership by committee. There's just not a person. That's why you need a strong CEO. You need a strong executive director. You need a strong board chair. You need human beings at every part of the organization that are going to lead the charge towards this new future, because it's not the same old thing. It's a new one. Now, from my perspective, it seems to me that most people resist change. Wouldn't you agree? Do you feel like most people resist change? I have. And why I say that is because as you're going towards implementing this new strategic plan or this new future or this new project, that it's going to be change for most people. And so are you managing the change, and are you overcoming or removing that resistance that exists with people? And if you're not, then you can imagine that you're not meeting your full capacity in terms of leading and transforming change within your organization. So check to yourself as saying, hey, are people resisting the change or are they embracing it? And it's not to say that they won't embrace it or that they will resist it. I just find that to me, most people resist change. And if you look at the individual level, specifically who's doing it, and then if you look at the group level, who's going to resist it, and then, the question I have for you is, do you have enough capacity to drive change throughout the entire organization? Top down, bottom up. If you're a small business, 10 people, or you're a small board, 6 people, there might not be so much change management to do. But if you're an organization with, 1,000, 10,000, 20,000 employees, that change management, that transformation could take years, and it's going to take a lot of effort. Even if it's just within your team of 30 people, do you have the capacity outlined? Are you clear that the capacity is there and the leadership capacity is there to drive change throughout the entire organization? So as a recap for all of this, number 1, communication. Do you have the structures? Do you have the flows for information to get top down, bottom up, and across? Second critical capacity, culture and behaviors. Do people know what they should be doing, how they should be doing it, and are you acknowledging when they succeed, and then are you acknowledging when they fall short on living up to how you want people to do things? Responsibilities and accountabilities. Are people doing what they need to do? Does everybody know who's doing what? And is there clarity in terms of how it's supposed to go and who you need to go to when things don't go right? The fourth critical capacity is tracking and reporting, and ultimately having a dashboard. Are we measuring success in real time? Can the team see if what they're doing is what they're supposed to be doing? Is there a structure for putting corrective action in place? And then are we tracking outcomes as well as actions? Finally, leadership and change management. Are there leaders who are committed to driving the change towards this strategic implementation, towards owning the outcomes for it to move forward? And have you assessed internally any resistance that might exist, any prospective resistance, and have followed some sort of change model in order to be able to mitigate that and move that forward successfully? So next steps for you as we finish up here, next steps that you can do, number 1, is assess your capacity in each of those 5 areas. Say, we're doing okay here, we're doing great here, we're not doing great here, and then look to improve on a scale of 0 to 20. Give yourself a 0 to 20 on each, and then do it by 100. And we have an objective tool for that as well. Now talk to your team about how you can improve in your capacity in those areas. Just have the conversation. How can we improve our communication? What does better communication even look like? What does better responsibilities and roles look like in accountability? What does better change management look like? You don't need to have the answer. You just need to be curious about asking the question. Finally, subscribe to our channel and receive the next videos where we dive into each area individually, and we're going to go through each video step by step and say, okay, here's some things that you need to do. Here's some considerations. Here's what you need to be aware of. And finally, if you'd like more information about how to lead the strategic implementation for your strategic plan or for strategic projects, feel free to visit SMEstrategy.net. And if you're looking for a partner to support you with the implementation or with the planning component, please don't hesitate to reach out. So my name is Anthony Taylor. This has been the 5 critical components of strategic implementation. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Love to hear your feedback in the comments. I hope you enjoyed the stream today. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and in the comments, and I'll be sure to reply to each of them. Once again, my name is Anthony Taylor from SME Strategy. Thanks so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.